Hey guys, let's talk about reasons behind why you've lost the creative spark, that feeling of energy and drive behind wanting to create that piece of art or outpour all your heart and soul into some writing. You just haven't got that feeling of productive energy and you feel flat, you feel unmotivated. It's like a light has been switched off and everything is grey, and this might have been going on for a few days or even longer than that, or it might just be a one-off thing for today. This is a video for those of you who feel like you've lost that creative spark, reasons behind why that might be, and of course solutions built into that to find ways to turn on that light again and rekindle that creativity that's in you. So this is not for people who have depression or more intense anxiety issues or suffering from some kind of grief or other mental health issue. I'll address those in other videos. This is for if things are going pretty well in your life, but you've just lost that motivation to create whatever it is you want to create. The first one is, and this is just a suggestion, it might not apply to you, you've been overloading your senses with too much dopamine, whether it be porn, films, too much Netflix, just binging hard and all that stimulation, that digital stimulation. Maybe you've been playing too many video games, even listening to lots of music, or going to some event, going to some festival, or going to some gig. I know that this sounds like perfectly harmless stuff, but actually when you're constantly blasting your dopamine receptors with dopamine hits and dopamine highs, these are very physical things we have in our brains that can get frazzled by too much dopamine. And I've found this myself. If I've been on some kind of a Netflix binge, I just sort of feel flat afterwards. You can sense that you've had a bit of an overload from dopamine, from various things. It could be clubbing, it could be partying, all kinds of things lead to stressing out of our dopamine receptors. And what happens is because they get kind of frazzled out and used up, it takes a lot more dopamine to get the feeling of a hit. And what that means is that the dopamine receptors frazzle out, or you have to continually apply more and more dopamine, more stimulus to feel that positive sensation you get from that positive high. But what that does is that when it comes to the real world and it comes to creating things from scratch from your own mind, you have been desensitized to the world around you. Things have become flat because your brain is less able now to take the cues that are around you and to work with the ideas in your head because they've already been used up. I don't really know the science behind it, but there is a flatness that comes out of too much dopamine stimulation and too much stimulation in general. So just be aware of that. Perhaps you've been overloading too much on just loud music and festivals and partying and even films or video games, all those things. Porn is a really big one. If you quit porn for a week, you're going to find your creativity flood back, especially if you've been hitting that too hard. Take it easy on the dopamine. Go for a bit of a fast on dopamine. Maybe take a week off from too much film watching and all that stuff and see your creativity return. Second reason behind the lack of your creative spark is your blood isn't moving. You're deoxygenated. You haven't got oxygen running through your blood system, and your system isn't moving properly because you've been too static, too immobile, there's too much sitting going on, too much sort of sitting around, lying around in your life, and you need to exercise more, you need to move more. If you're feeling that lack of creative spark and you're trying to think as much as you can, perhaps you've been too much in your mind, too static, too in your head, and that can be a problem. I mean, obviously when you've been doing the movement and you've got oxygen running through your veins, then a bit of thinking is a good thing. That's where creativity comes from. But the mind and the body is very closely linked, and if you've been too static and not moving, and you've been allowing your blood to kind of slow down, and there's not much fresh oxygen in your blood, and it's becoming too carbonated, or whatever the word is, you need to start moving more. Go for a walk, get into nature, get into your body now and start feeling the sensations around you again, and start getting out of your mind. Give your mind a break and just be there in the present. This has been really helpful. A lot of very well-known creative types and writers like Charles Dickens and stuff went for very long walks and got into nature and breathed in that fresh air, got the blood moving through the exercise and the movement, and oxygen is very, very stimulating for the mind again, and that's great for your brain, great for creativity. Third thing, nature and sunlight. Now I mentioned nature a little bit in the past one. That's true, there's a bit of overlap here, but get outside and get in touch with nature again. This is also harking back to the first point, which is about taking on too much artificial stimulation. And I think a lot of our bodies sometimes crave, and when you feel flat, this is often an indication of that. We crave and need to be as we always were, as our ancestors were, as our caveman ancestors were, running through the fields, in the trees, in the forests, listening to birds singing. This is a very human experience, and when we deny that for too long, we start to shut down. That's what I believe. We need more sense in our life. We need more nature, more of a sense of nature being around us, more of a connectedness to nature. After all, the universe and the world around us is what is feeding our creativity. It's feeding our souls. We need to get in touch with that stuff again. I know it sounds a little bit woo-woo and out there, but just keep it simple. Get yourself out into nature again. Go for a walk. Roll around in the grass. Smell the grass. Smell the air. Enjoy the views. Watch water dribbling down onto a leaf in a forest, and tell me that doesn't inspire you. There's something very powerful about being in nature, and I think a lot of us in our very city encroached lives tend to avoid, even inadvertently, interacting with nature, and then we wonder why we're feeling depressed or stuck. It's because we are humans. We need that connection with nature. So get yourself out there, and I would encourage you to, and this is me talking to myself as well, at least once a week to go on a kind of adventure in nature. Do some kind of a hike, go camping, go to the lake, go fishing, just be in and around nature, and tell me that when you come back from that trip, you don't feel totally energized and the creative spark has come back. It happens every time for me. Take a notebook, go on walks where you have your notebook with you and you're walking through nature and you're just taking it all in, and whatever idea comes to mind, you want to start writing those down. And the more that you write down, the more you are creatively inspired. And that's very, very powerful stuff. And if you haven't got nature to get out to, then go for a walk in your city, your town, and do what I call an adventure idea walk, where you go out, you've got your notebook and you're just taking notes as you walk, and you're inspired by the surroundings and the architecture and that stuff. That's all good as well. Next reason behind your lack of creative spark is because you're taking on too much negativity. You're overloaded with negativity. You're in the mode of either being in proximity to too much negative stuff, so the news, negative friends, negative influences around you, arguments at home, arguments with your spouse, just dark thoughts and dark conversations, and just negativity and frustration, and allowing yourself to veer too much and very lazily, I think, towards anger and seeing the dark side of things and seeing why things are bad and trying to find reasons to complain. You're engulfing yourself and your mind in negativity, and this has a very powerful kind of anchoring effect on your sense of freedom, your sense of creativity, your productivity. If you're filling your head with negativity, you can't possibly be creative, because creativity is born in the void, which is an absence of any kind of thought, really. That's where creativity starts, and you need to reset that. You need to get out of your negative thoughts. Positivity is also very stimulating of that, because positivity stimulates us as humans. We are invigorated by the sense of hope and joy in our lives, and that's very important for creativity as well. So get yourself out of that negative stuff, even negative music, negative media, negative, violent, angry, aggressive TV programs. Get out, get away from that for a bit. Get back into nature, as I say, and focus on the positive. Meditate, clear that dark cloud of negativity hanging over you. Get rid of those people who constantly bring complaint and anger and frustration into your life. You need to be prioritizing yourself. You need to be realizing that you only live once, and that you've got to immerse yourself in the positive, in joy, in nature. And I think just too much negativity can be a real dampener on creativity. So that could be a big reason as well. The final reason behind your not feeling creative is that lack of commitment. And when I say commitment, I mean you are not setting boundaries. And this manifests in two ways. The first one is you're not vertically committing to something. You're trying to do everything. There's no discernment in your life. You're trying to be the jack of all trades. There's no particular area or window of study or research or target market that you are focused on for any given phase of your career. You're trying to do too much, and because you're overwhelmed with all the options and all the shiny things you could be doing, and you're trying to be this and that, you're trying to be everyone for everyone, or everything for everyone, and trying to master many skills at the same time. This lack of boundary, this lack of discernment, this lack of commitment to something specific, to something niche, is creating this flood of overwhelm, which is detrimental to feeling, being, and acting creatively. You are unable to be creative if you haven't got a box to work inside. Creativity is all about the limits you impose on things. So have you ever found it easier, for example, when you're at school and a teacher gives you an essay to write on anything you want, or you have the option of writing an essay on panda bears in China between the ages of between the 1980s and the 1990s. You have a very specific area to be working with. So creativity flourishes in restriction. Creativity flourishes when you have a deadline, when you have limits, when you have boundaries. It's just the way that it works. You have less to deal with, but of course when you have less to deal with, you have more things that you are able to hone in on, that you can collaborate and combine ideas in, and that's where creativity is very effective. So there's the lack of commitment to this vertical commitment, so going narrow on your focus. That's one way that you are lacking in commitment. The other way is the sort of lateral commitment, lacking in commitment over time, not being consistent enough, not showing up when you have said you would show up. A lot of people that you see who are seemingly incredibly prolific and incredibly creative have committed over the long term to doing things over and over and over again. Even if they don't feel like it, they show up to their desk and they write that thing. They write when the buzzer starts. They don't wait for inspiration to come for them out of the blue. They act even if they are tired or grumpy or moody. They still do it. And if you're a writer, for example, you start writing whatever comes to mind. You write rubbish. You're committed to doing the writing no matter what happens. You are comfortable and okay with not being perfect and writing absolute crap, so that later on you can refine and edit and then turn it into an amazing piece. But it is about committing to the long term. It is about committing to consistency. And a lot of people, they're not very good at that these days. People find something they're interested in and they try it for a week. They realize that they're not getting much traction with it and no one seems to be loving them for it, and they give up and they move on to the next thing. And this is that lack of commitment temporally over the longer term. So there's two aspects to the commitment side, which is going deep and narrow on something, which will give you that creative spark. And amazingly enough, committing to something over the long term is going to give you that creativity when you know how to harness it. So it's about showing up, and of course if you feel creative, fantastic, but on those days where you don't feel creative, you do the work anyway. And the trick to doing the work and creating creativity out of it, even if you don't feel the spark, is to just start doing anything, even if it's rubbish. If you know that at 9 a.m. every morning you have to start painting, you just put something on the canvas, or you start scribbling. And the more you move and the more you engage in that creative act, even if you feel flat, the more charged you're going to feel creatively, and it's going to spring out of it. It always does. So be committed over the long term, over the lateral field, and be committed vertically for that extra creative spark. Hope those ideas helped. If you've got any questions, do send me a comment. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, and I'll see you in the next video.